Welcome to my channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and like. The alarm wailed, a piercing shriek like a wounded beast, tearing through the suffocating silence of the Starling's cramped cockpit. Jake Ramsey, a grizzled cargo pilot with a decade of scars earned among the stars, gripped the control yoke, his knuckles white with strain. Sweat streamed down his forehead, stinging his eyes, forcing him to blink rapidly to focus on the console's flashing red alerts. The system warnings danced like a death knell. Engine 2 was dead, Engine 1 groaned as if ready to explode, and navigation was completely shot. Beyond the cockpit's viewport, Clythar's ionized clouds churned violently, their eerie purple glow flickering like ghostly flames, as if the sky itself smoldered. "Mayday, Mayday, this is the freighter Starling, Flight 392 bound for Vesper Station." Jake roared into the comms, his voice hoarse, drowning out the dying whine of the engines. "Navigation's fried, main engines out of control. Requesting emergency landing coordinates or rescue support. Repeat, immediate assistance needed." But only cold static answered, as if the universe had turned its back on him. He slammed a fist into the console, the metal clanging under his callous hand. "Son of a bitch," he muttered, his tone thick with sardonic bite. No one was coming. Not in this godforsaken corner of the galaxy, where comm signals were as faint as a dying man's breath. Through the viewport, Clythar's surface loomed like a vision of hell. Jagged stone peaks, sharp as razor blades, pierced the haze of green smoke rising from abandoned mining pits. Deep canyons slashed across the terrain, like colossal scars on the planet's hide. Jake gritted his teeth, yanking the yoke with every ounce of strength to keep the ship's nose level. "Come on, Starling," he whispered, his voice low, as if coaxing an old friend. "Don't quit on me now, you rusty piece of junk." The ship shuddered violently, fighting its fate, but Jake knew it couldn't hold out much longer. Then the crash came. A deafening explosion rocked the ship as the Starling slammed into a rocky ridge. Metal screamed, tearing through stone and earth, shrieking like a beast being ripped apart. The right wing ignited, flames erupting in a fierce blaze that painted the sky a brilliant orange. Jake was thrown against his seat, the safety harness cutting into his shoulders, his breath choked in his chest. He kicked the cockpit release, tumbling out just as the fuel tank detonated. Fire roared behind him, swallowing the ship and 500,000 credits worth of cargo. The blast echoed through the canyon, a brutal declaration that Jake was now alone. He rolled across the ground, red dust coating his jacket, blood trickling from a deep gash on his forehead, dripping onto his chin. He knelt on one knee, breathing heavily, eyes locked on the burning wreckage. "Nice work, Jake," he muttered, his voice dripping with self-mockery. "Another perfect day to be stranded on this damn planet." He wiped the blood from his face, the sting of the cut sharp but trivial compared to the brushes with death he'd survived before. Heavy, synchronized footsteps thudded behind him, like the drumbeat of an advancing army. Then a voice, cold and sharp as a blade, sliced through the air in a language he didn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. "Surround him. Weapons ready. Don't let him escape." Jake stood slowly, his torn jacket hanging off one shoulder, face smeared with soot and blood, but his posture remained unyielding. He turned to face a squad of Clytharian soldiers, 8 towering figures, their blue metallic skin glinting like liquid steel under the purple sky. Sleek black armor hugged their forms, energy rifles aimed at his chest, red lights pulsing from the barrels like the eyes of death itself. One stepped forward, distinct from the rest. She was smaller, but her presence dominated the space, like a storm compressed into a lithe frame. Her armor was lighter, form-fitting, accentuating sharp curves, not for show, but crafted for speed and precision, the gear of a warrior. Her golden eyes blazed, cold and piercing, sizing him up like a predator assessing prey. "You've violated Clythar's restricted airspace," she said, her voice low and cutting, her English flawless but tinged with an alien cadence, as if learned from a machine. "I am Commander Vera of the Clytharian Vanguard. One reason. Just one. Why I shouldn't put a bolt through your throat right now." Jake didn't flinch, though he felt the weight of 8 rifles trained on him. Because I didn't mean to be here, he replied, his voice calm, almost conversational, like chatting with an old friend. My ship got fried by an ion storm. Take a look at that scrap heap. He jerked his head toward the smoldering remains of the Starling. I'm no spy, just a freighter. No interest in starting a war with you folks. Shoot me, but you'll miss out on finding out who I am. Vera tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing, as if trying to see through him. You're awfully confident for someone who just fell out of the sky, she said, her voice low but laced with a flicker of curiosity she tried to mask. She signaled, and 2 Clitherians stepped forward, clamping his arms with hands like steel vices. You'll answer to me. Everything. From now on, you're mine. They dragged him toward a transport hidden among rocky outcrops, its engines humming with a low, predatory growl. Vera strode ahead, her steps bold and assured, as if the entire planet was her domain. Jake let them pull him along, offering no resistance, but his eyes never left her. He saw more than just threat in her gaze. There was something else, a spark of curiosity, however faint, glinting in those golden eyes as if she was grappling with something beyond what she'd been taught about humans. The Clitherian underground base was a frigid labyrinth of metal, its dim blue lighting casting ghostly glows on flawless alloy walls. Endless corridors stretched on, silent except for the rhythmic march of guards. They moved without a word, without a glance, like machines programmed for absolute obedience. Jake felt the weight of their iron discipline, but it didn't faze him. He'd faced worse: ambushes in deep space, deliveries to crime lords in the asteroid belts. This was just another challenge, and he had no intention of breaking. They stopped before a security door, its metallic surface shimmering with blue light. Vera turned, motioning the guards to step back. This is where we talk, she said, her voice icy, but her eyes sharp, probing for any crack in his resolve. The door slid open, revealing a vast interrogation room, glossy black alloy walls, no shadows to hide in, and a single metal chair at the center, its cuffs gleaming like they were waiting for his wrists. Jake walked in without prompting, moving with the confidence of a man in his own home. He stood in the center, shoulders square, eyes locked on Vera as she followed. The door sealed with a heavy clunk, echoing like a final verdict. She faced him, a few meters away, arms crossed, her gaze unrelenting. You're not like most, she said after a long silence, her voice low but edged. Human men don't act like this. They tremble when they see our guns. I've seen worse, Jake replied, his tone even, eyes never leaving hers. He'd faced pirates, plasma storms, and betrayals by his own clients. Her rifles weren't the scariest thing he'd ever stared down. Vera circled him slowly, each step deliberate, her boots clicking on the metal floor. She moved like a predator, her golden eyes peeling back his layers. Let me guess, she said, her voice a near whisper. Ex-soldier? Spy? Or just a smuggler who thinks charm and bravado will save him? Jake's lips twitched, a smile that wasn't quite amused, just a way to stay steady. I haul cargo. Get shot at. Take hits. Survive. Which part interests you more? She stopped behind him, close enough for him to feel her breath, cold yet carrying an odd heat. I don't trust humans, she said, her voice softer, almost to herself. Too weak. Too desperate for love. Sounds like you're talking about yourself. Jake shot back, his voice light but sharp as a blade. He knew he was playing with fire, but he wasn't the type to bow under pressure. Vera was in front of him in a blur, her slap swift and brutal, snapping his head to the side. Blood trickled from his lip, the pain sharp but not enough to shake him. He lifted his head, eyes locked on hers. Is this the part where I'm supposed to whimper? He asked, his voice low, laced with defiance. Vera stared at the blood on his lip, but instead of satisfaction, her eyes hardened, as if she'd seen something unexpected. You're not what I thought, she muttered, almost to herself. And that's the problem. She pressed a button on the wall, and the chair's cuffs snapped open with a metallic click. Sit or don't. You're not leaving either way. Jake sat, not out of fear, but because he wanted to see her next move. He knew this game. Interrogation wasn't just about questions, it was about who held the reins. And he wasn't about to let her win easily. Vera moved to a console in the corner, pulling up his flight log on a holographic display. She scrolled through the data, blue light reflecting off her sharp features. "You didn't lie," she said after a pause. "Your orbit was off by 40 degrees. The ion storm matches our satellite data. You were supposed to land at Vesper Station. Then why do you still look at me like I'm a spy?" Jake asked, meeting her gaze, unflinching. Vera leaned against the console, arms crossed, her eyes like daggers. "Because you were carrying sensor-shielded cargo. That's not standard freight." Jake shrugged, his tone casual. "Standard enough. You know how it is." He wasn't telling the whole truth. The cargo had a special purpose, but he wasn't dumb enough to spill that now. She leaned closer, close enough for him to feel the heat radiating from her. "You're clean," she said, her voice low. "But I don't care. This isn't a trial. This is me deciding what to do with you." She stepped forward, each move deliberate, stopping inches from him. "I've fought your kind. I know what desperation makes you do. I've seen men twice your size break down in minutes." Jake met her gaze, fearless. "You won't see that here." Vera's lips curled, not quite a smile, but a flicker of restrained curiosity. "We'll test that." She pointed to the door. "The guards outside won't interfere unless I signal. You've got a shot right now, while I'm unarmed. Try it." Jake didn't move. He sat there, eyes locked on hers. "I didn't come here to fight, Commander." She studied him for a moment, her golden eyes flashing as if searching for something. Then she turned, heading for the door. "You're lucky I'm feeling generous today." But instead of sending him to a cell, she led him down another corridor, deeper into the base. They stopped at a small holding room, low ceiling, no windows, just a sink and a camera above the door. "Strip," Vera ordered, not looking at him. Jake raised an eyebrow, his eyes glinting with challenge. "You checked my logs. I'm clean. Not clean enough. I want to see for myself." Jake peeled off his shirt, slow and deliberate, revealing a lean, scarred torso, each mark a story of survival, ambushes in the belts, near death and plasma storms. He stood there in his underwear, his gaze a wordless dare. Vera watched, silent, her eyes tracing his scars like reading a map. Then she turned away. "Lock him in. No cuffs. I want to see how long he lasts alone." The guards shoved Jake inside, the door slamming shut. Vera lingered behind the bulletproof glass, watching him through the thick pane. As the lights shifted to artificial night, Jake stood, bare-chested, his eyes locked on hers, unwavering. She left first, her steps quicker than usual, but the image of him, calm, unbreakable, haunted her through the night. Vera couldn't sleep. She told herself it was the pressure, tactical reports, patrol plans, a squad to keep in line. But deep down, she knew the truth. Jake Ramsey, the human in the cell, didn't beg, didn't flinch, didn't try to bribe her. He just watched her, his gaze turning the tables, as if he were interrogating her. That was more dangerous than any weapon she'd faced. Humans, she'd been taught, were weak, easily broken, always fleeing or groveling. But Jake was different. He was a puzzle, and Vera hated puzzles. In the command room, she sat before a hollow screen, monitoring the cell's camera. Jake still stood, 20 hours in, no food, no words, no pacing. A young Lieutenant, Kale, entered clutching a data pad. "Commander," she said cautiously, "Delta team reports a minor explosion in the western mines. Smugglers, maybe? Should we send a patrol?" Vera's eyes didn't leave the screen. "Deploy a recon unit? Observe only." Kale hesitated, glancing at the monitor. "That's the human, isn't it?" Vera turned, her gaze cutting like a blade. Kale swallowed hard and hurried out. Vera switched off the screen, stood, blood pounding in her veins. She didn't announce her visit to the holding area. Guards snapped to attention as she passed, none daring to speak. She took the stairs, bypassing the elevator. She didn't like standing still when her blood was boiling, and today, it burned hotter than ever. When she reached the cell, Jake was sitting, back against the wall, one leg bent, hands resting on his knee. "You look like you just walked through hell," he said, his voice light but provocative, as if he knew it would rile her. Vera stepped inside, the door sealing with a heavy hiss. "I've seen worse," she replied, her voice cold as ice. "You've lasted longer than I expected." "Didn't know this was a timed contest," Jake said, raising an eyebrow, his eyes gleaming with defiance. "It is," she said, her tone hard. "And you've passed." Jake tilted his head, his gaze never leaving her. "I've had your soldiers crying in half this time. No food, no talk, no pacing. You waiting for me to beg?" "Waiting for something," Jake replied, his voice low, eyes piercing as if seeing through her. "Maybe I'm just bored." Vera knelt before him, close enough to see the faint scars on his shoulders, each one a testament to survival. "You're not boring," she said, her voice no longer a compliment but a warning. "And that's the problem." Then the lights flickered. The floor trembled. Sirens blared from the upper levels, sharp as a blade slicing the air. Vera cursed in Clitherian, slamming her wrist calm. "What's happening?" "Fire in the tech sector." A voice crackled through, urgent. "Minor explosion, possibly an energy surge. Rescue teams are deploying. Contain it." "I'm on my way." Vera turned toward the door, but Jake was already up, moving like a shadow. "You stay here," she ordered, her voice iron. "Good luck thinking you can stop me," he said, stepping to the control panel. With 2 fingers he pried off the cover, yanked a few wires, and the door slid open in 6 seconds, so fast Vera barely blinked. She stared, her golden eyes flashing with shock and suspicion. "What are you?" Jake turned, his lips curling in a confident, taunting smile. "More than just a freighter." Then he sprinted into the corridor, barefoot, without hesitation. Vera swore in Clitherian, fists clenched, and chased after him, her heart pounding in her chest. Black smoke billowed from the tech sector, coiling like a venomous serpent in the stifling air. The fire wasn't massive, but it was ferocious, licking at a cracked energy conduit that spat blood-red sparks. Jake Ramsey sprinted through the corridor, bare feet pounding the metal floor, eyes squinting to pierce the thick haze. Sirens wailed, their shrill cries mingling with the screams of a young Clitherian soldier, his leg trapped under a collapsed steel beam. Jake dropped to his knees beside him, his voice low but steady, cutting through the chaos. "Stay still. Don't move." He gripped the beam, muscles in his shoulders and arms straining, veins bulging like ropes. Gritting his teeth, he took a deep breath and lifted. The steel groaned, inching up, heavy as a starship. The Clitherian, face pale, dragged himself free, his leg bleeding but alive. Jake let the beam crash down, the clang echoing like a defiant proclamation. Smoke swirled around his shoulders, his eyes stinging, but he didn't pause to catch his breath. He coughed once, wiped sweat mixed with blood from his forehead, and checked the soldier's condition. Commander Vera emerged from the smoke, her sleek black armor glinting under the fire's red glow. She seized Jake's wrist, yanking him from the danger zone with a force that nearly threw him off balance. "Are you insane?" she shouted, her voice trembling, not just with anger, but with something else, concern she tried to mask with a razor-sharp glare. Her golden eyes blazed, as if ready to burn him where he stood. "What, leave your guy to die under that?" Jake shot back, his voice rough from the smoke, but his gaze unflinching. He stood tall, broad shoulders defiant against the choking heat and haze. "We don't abandon the wounded," Vera said, her voice hard as steel, but her eyes flickered, as if his words had struck a hidden chord within her. "Then we've got something in common," Jake replied, stepping forward, not giving her a chance to counter. Vera grabbed his wrist again, pulling him back with more force than necessary. "You saved him," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, her eyes locked on his. Jake met her gaze unyielding. "I don't care what species someone is when they're screaming under burning steel." His tone was calm, but carried a weight that made Vera release his wrist, as if pushed back by the sheer sincerity of his words. She didn't report his actions. Instead, she did something riskier: she let him stay. For the next 3 days, Jake was moved to a temporary shelter near the barracks, a small room with a metal cot and a fake window casting blue light. He was still watched, but no cuffs, no interrogations. Clitherian soldiers passed him, their eyes averted, not from fear, but from unease. A human, unarmed and powerless, had swayed Commander Vera, the iron-willed leader known for her ruthlessness. Whispers spread through the base like ripples, but no one dared speak openly in her presence. On the 3rd night, Jake's doors slid open without warning. 2 Clitherian guards stood there, their blue skin shimmering in the dim light, faces expressionless. "The commander demands your presence," one said, voice flat as a machine. Jake rose, asking nothing, slinging on his jacket and following. They led him to an underground training area, through narrow corridors where blue light glinted off walls like sharp blades. They stopped at a curved, unmarked door. It slid open, and the guards stepped back, leaving him to enter alone. Vera stood in the center, clad in black training gear that hugged her like a second skin, accentuating sharp, dangerous curves. Her hair spilled over her shoulders, glinting blue under the faint lights, like woven liquid metal. She tossed the training sword his way, the motion swift and precise. Jake caught it without looking, feeling its weight as an extension of himself. "I hate being wrong," Vera said, her voice low, stepping onto the mat with the stance of a warrior accustomed to victory. "You think you're strong. I think humans burn bright then turn to ash in a blink. Maybe you're testing the wrong guy," Jake replied, twirling the sword, checking its balance. He stood tall, eyes locked on hers, fearless. Vera raised her sword, ready, her golden eyes flashing like sparks. "Prove me wrong." They clashed, steel meeting steel, the impact ringing through the sealed room. This wasn't a technical duel, but a challenge, a battle of wills. Vera was fast, impossibly so, each strike slicing the air like a blade, precise and ruthless. But Jake didn't back down. He parried, countered, sometimes slipping under her arm to tap her side with the flat of his blade, not to harm, but to remind her he wasn't easily subdued. After 15 minutes, the air was thick with heat, sweat dripping down their faces. Breaths came in gasps, muscles taut. Vera's grip slipped for a moment, and Jake seized it, disarming her with a lightning-fast move. He pressed the blade to her throat, not hard, just enough to feel her pulse racing beneath her skin. His breathing was heavy, but his eyes never left hers. "Want to keep going?" he asked, voice low, brimming with challenge. Vera stared at him, sweat trickling down her neck, her pulse pounding under the blade. She pushed his sword aside slowly, stepping back to retrieve her weapon, then dropped it to the floor with a soft clink. "You've proven it," she said, her voice even, but her eyes glinted with something, respect, or perhaps something deeper. "You're not weak." "And you?" Jake asked, his gaze unrelenting, as if probing her mind. Her golden eyes shimmered. "I don't bet on fights I can't win." Jake stepped closer, his hand hovering near her hip, close enough to feel her body's heat. "Wanna bet?" he asked, voice a near whisper. Vera's breath hitched, her eyes locked on his, as if wrestling with herself. Then she turned, striding toward the door, her shoulders rigid but trembling slightly. "Tomorrow night, West Training Room. After lights out. Alone." She vanished through the door, leaving Jake on the mat, heart pounding, not from the fight, but from something else, a connection both felt but neither dared name. The next night, the West Training Room was shrouded in darkness, lit only by a faint overhead lamp casting sharp shadows. Jake stood at the door, fingers brushing the control panel, sensing Vera's presence inside like a magnetic pull. The door slid open, and he stepped in, the door slamming shut behind him. Vera stood on the mat, no armor, just thin training gear, her hair loose, golden eyes glowing like embers in the dark. "You came," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "I knew I had to," Jake replied, stepping forward, eyes never leaving hers. He felt the heat in the air, not from combat, but from the tension between them. Is this still your test? He asked, voice light but edged. No, Vera said, tilting her head, her gaze piercing. This is about my mistake. I misjudged you. I saw a human and thought weakness. I saw your calm and thought it a trick. You shouldn't trust assumptions, Jake said, voice low, a gentle reminder. She stepped closer, near enough for him to feel her breath, quick and uneven. I want to test something else, she said, her voice low, almost dangerous. Name it. I want to know why I keep coming back to you. Jake placed a hand on her hip, slow, waiting for resistance. There was none. She stood still, eyes fixed on him. You want control, he said, voice certain. But not with me. She pushed him, not hard, just enough to test. Jake stepped back, then forward, faster, stronger. She raised a hand to push again, but he caught her wrist, spinning her, pinning her against the wall, not forcefully, just enough to hold her. She glared, eyes narrowing, but there was no anger, only an internal struggle. You're lucky I let you breathe, she said, voice trembling slightly. And you're lucky I didn't walk away, Jake replied, his gaze unwavering. They stood there, breaths mingling, the space between them charged with heat. Her hand rested lightly on his chest, nails grazing his shirt, making him clench his jaw. This is dangerous, she said, voice a near whisper. I know, he replied, leaning in, lips brushing her ear. You hate humans, but you don't hate me. She didn't deny it. That was all the answer he needed. Then it broke loose, not chaos, but a fierce rhythm, like a wordless dance. Vera pulled him closer, not to attack, but to connect. Her hands slid over his shoulders, nails scraping lightly, sending heat through him. Her breath was ragged, her voice trembling for the first time. Enough, she said, but her tone lacked conviction. Jake didn't budge. You sure? He asked, eyes locked on hers. She pushed him away, harder this time, as if reclaiming control. Jake stepped back, sinking onto the mat, watching as she stood, adjusting her collar, shoulders stiff but trembling. Get out, she said, not looking at him, her voice firm but lacking its usual edge. Jake rose, slinging his jacket over his shoulder, eyes still on her. You don't get to say I'm not enough. Not after tonight. He left, the door slamming shut, leaving Vera alone in the dark, heart racing, not from anger, but from a feeling she didn't want to name. The next day, a massive explosion shook the Western mines, no accident but a deliberate attack. Initial reports from the tech team pointed to human technology, casting suspicion on Jake as part of a plot. Vera stood in the command room, eyes icy, fists clenched. Take him, she ordered, voice devoid of emotion. Find Ramsey. Now. But when the guards reached the shelter, Jake was gone. On the metal table, only a small comm device remained, its screen blinking with a message. I'm not your enemy. Meet me at Black Rock Canyon. Vera stared at the message, her golden eyes flashing with anger and doubt. She gripped the device, heart pounding, unsure if she faced a traitor or a man she was beginning to trust. The sky above Black Rock Canyon blazed with violet light, ionized clouds twisting like giant serpents, churning in the heavy air. A sharp wind howled through, carrying red dust and the acrid scent of burned metal from distant abandoned mines. Vera stood atop a jutting rock ledge, her sleek black armor glinting in the eerie glow, energy rifle gripped tightly, her index finger resting lightly on the trigger. Her Cletherian squad, 5 strong, fanned out in a crescent formation, weapons primed, their eyes cold and sharp as blades. Before them, Jake Ramsey stood alone in the canyon's heart, hands raised high, unarmed, unarmored, only a small comm device gleaming in his right hand. Red dust swirled around his boots, but he stood firm, shoulders squared, gaze unwavering. You've got 10 seconds to explain, Vera said, her voice like tempered steel, the rifle's barrel locked on Jake's chest, its red targeting light pulsing like a warning. Why'd you escape? Why lure me here? Jake met her eyes, his stare calm, almost unnaturally so, as if he were in a command room, not a canyon with 5 guns aimed at him. The attack on the mines wasn't me, he said, his voice even but carrying a weight that silenced any interruption. I hacked your system when I fixed the cell door. I saw the data, previous explosions, energy signatures. Not human. Clitherian rebels, using stolen tech to pin it on us. Vera's eyes narrowed, her finger tightening on the trigger, golden irises flashing with suspicion. You expect me to trust an Earthman who vanished right before the blast? Her voice was razor-sharp, but a faint tremor betrayed her, as if she were wrestling between instinct and what she'd seen of him. No, Jake replied, his tone steady, almost daring. I expect you to check. He raised the comm device slowly, careful not to provoke the guards, its light reflecting off his dust-streaked face. I pulled data from the Starling before it went down. Coordinates, energy traces, all matching the Western mines. Verify it. Vera signaled Lieutenant Kale, the closest, her blue skin shimmering under the purple light. Kale stepped forward, eyes wary, taking the device from Jake with the caution of handling a grenade. She linked it to a handheld scanner, the screen flickering as data loaded. Silence gripped the canyon, broken only by the wind's wail and the scanner's faint beep. Commander, Kale said after a minute, voice trembling slightly. The data checks out. The explosions carry Clitherian energy signatures, not human tech. There's a pattern from the Western mines, identical to rebel reactor cores. Vera's gaze never left Jake, her eyes boring into him as if to unravel his soul. Then why run? She asked, her voice softer, almost a whisper. If you're innocent, why not stay? Jake's lips twitched, a smile not of amusement but of self-mockery, the kind of a man used to being misjudged. Because I knew you wouldn't listen. Not right away. And I don't sit in a cell while the truth gets buried. He stood taller, eyes locked on hers, challenging her to see the reality. She lowered her rifle, slowly, but her gaze remained icy, like a predator not yet ready to release its prey. You know too much about my base, she said, voice low. You hacked our systems, escaped, and now you stand here like I owe you thanks. What are you, Ramsey? Just a freighter, he answered, but his eyes told a different story, sharp, confident, those of a man who'd faced danger and walked away. With a few extra skills. Then the ground quaked. A deafening explosion roared from the canyon's western edge, black smoke surging skyward, staining the violet haze with a fiery orange glow. Shattered rocks tumbled from the cliffs above, their crashes like a beast's growl. The Clitherians snapped into defensive positions, kneeling, rifles ready, but before Vera could issue a command, a barrage of energy bolts lanced from the high ledges, blazing like plasma blades. Rebels. Not 3 or 5, but a dozen, clad in enhanced Clitherian armor, their weapons gleaming in the dark, moving with the precision of a trained unit. Ambush. Vera bellowed, diving behind a boulder, returning fire with lethal speed. Jake rolled, dodging a bolt that cracked the ground, red dust exploding like a cloud. Unarmored, he sprinted to Kale, now sprawled on the ground, blood seeping from a shoulder wound, her face ashen. Gimme the rifle, Jake said, his voice hard, brooking no refusal. Kale, wincing, tossed him the weapon, her eyes flashing reluctant respect. Jake knelt, firing back, each shot terrifyingly precise. One rebel fell, then 2, their heads erupting in blue energy bursts. Vera, from her position, coordinated her squad with deadly accuracy, her voice crackling through the comms, sharp and uncompromising. Kale, hold the left flank. Taryn, snipe from the ridge. Ramsey, don't die. Not planning on it. Jake shouted, rolling behind another boulder, dropping a rebel trying to flank them. But the enemy outnumbered them, holding the high ground, firing from cover like hawks on the hunt. An energy grenade detonated nearby, hurling Vera to the ground, her armor shattered at the shoulder, blood streaming, crimson against her blue skin. Jake saw her fall, his heart pounding, not from fear, but something deeper. He abandoned his position, racing through a hail of bolts, moving like a shadow, dodging energy lances that tore the air. He reached Vera, dragging her behind a boulder, pressing hard on her wound to stem the blood. You okay? He asked, voice low but urgent, eyes locked on hers. Don't protect me. Vera growled, but her voice shook not from anger, but pain and something she didn't want to admit, reliance, if only for a moment. She tried to stand, but Jake held her down, his grip firm yet careful. Listen, Commander, he said, voice low but cutting like a blade. You want a lead? Fine. But you need to live. He tore a strip from his shirt, binding her wound, his movements swift but precise, like he'd done it 100 times. Stay put. I've got this. Before Vera could protest, Jake rose, rifle in hand, and charged into the fray. He moved like a tempest, dodging fire, returning shots, and dragging a wounded Clitherian to safety behind a rock. Vera, despite her pain, gripped a sniper rifle, dropping 2 rebels from a distance, each shot a declaration that she was still in command. Her actions gave Jake openings, and they synced, wordlessly, like warriors who'd fought side by side for years. The battle raged for 10 minutes, but it felt like hours, each second heavy as a hammer blow. When the last rebel fell, the canyon fell silent, only the wind's wail and the stench of burned ozone lingering. Jake knelt by Kale, checking her pulse, his blood-smeared hands steady. She's alive, he said, voice hoarse, eyes scanning for threats. He turned to Vera, now standing, clutching her shoulder, blood seeping through the makeshift bandage, but her eyes no longer those of a cold commander. You didn't have to do that, she said, voice low, almost a whisper, as if speaking to herself. Save them. Save me. Jake stood, wiping blood from his face, eyes fixed on her. It's not about have to, he said, voice firm. I don't leave people behind. His words were simple, but their weight seemed to pull Vera from the invisible armor she'd worn for years. She looked at him, golden eyes shimmering, no longer with suspicion or challenge. Something else flickered there, acknowledgement, respect, maybe something deeper she wasn't ready to name. I hate this feeling, she said, voice trembling, barely audible. Safe. With you. Jake stepped closer, so near she felt his breath, warm against the canyon's chill. That's your problem, he said, voice low, almost gentle. You've never let anyone close enough to make you feel it. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a force, enveloping her. She didn't reply, but her shoulders eased, her jaw softened. She turned, signaling the remaining squad, her voice sharp again but lacking its former ice. Fall back. Get Kale to base. Call medics. The Clitherians moved swiftly, but their glances at Jake had shifted, no longer distrust, but grudging respect. They returned to the base as Clythar's sun rose, bathing the desert in a crimson sea, as if the planet welcomed them with a new promise. Vera filed her report in the command room, blue hololight accentuating her sharp features, now less severe. The rebels were eliminated, Jake's data verified, and his name cleared. An officer suggested escorting Jake to Vesper Station, but he shook his head, standing before Vera, shoulders square, eyes steady. I'm staying, he said, voice resolute, gaze locked on hers. Not for you. I want to see where this goes. Vera studied him, her eyes keen but no longer cold, as if seeing him anew. You'll be trouble, she said, voice low, but her lips twitched, almost a smile. Always am, Jake replied, his familiar crooked grin confident, teasing. She stepped forward, grasping his hand before the squad, a move that silenced the room. Murmurs rippled, but she ignored them. He stays. My orders, she declared, voice brooking no argument. Anyone objects, they deal with me. She turned to Jake, golden eyes flashing a challenge. And if you dare say I'm wrong again, I'll handle you myself. Jake chuckled, eyes never leaving hers. I'm looking forward to it. The Clitherian sky that night was crystal clear, a blue-green moon hanging low, casting ghostly beams across the crimson desert. Jake Ramsey and Vera stood side by side on the base's observation deck, the cold wind slicing through the air, carrying the scent of dust and metal. Jake leaned against the railing, his gaze drifting over the flickering lights of the base below, like lost stars scattered on the ground. Vera stood beside him, her armor swapped for a sleek black training suit, arms crossed, but her stance no longer rigid as it once was. So, you really went and did it? Jake said, voice low, eyes glinting with mischief. Put me out there. In front of the whole squad. Bold move, Commander. It was always real. Vera replied, her tone firm, though her eyes flickered, as if weighing the gravity of her choice. Just riskier now. Jake turned to her, his gaze sharp yet warm, like a small flame piercing the dark. What's got you worried? Your reputation? Brass breathing down your neck? Or something bigger? She stared out at the desert, moonlight reflecting in her golden eyes, sparking tiny flecks of light. She was silent for a moment, then spoke, voice low, almost a whisper. I'm worried. But not enough to pretend I don't want this. Her words were simple, but carried a rare sincerity, as if she'd shed an invisible layer of armor. Jake brushed his fingers lightly under her chin, tracing her jawline, the touch gentle but deliberate. First thing I noticed about you. Not the guns, not the armor. It's how you try to hide that you're scared of letting someone get close. Vera's rare smile flickered, nearly invisible, but enough to light up her face. I still don't understand you, she said, voice soft, her eyes flashing with curiosity. Keep figuring me out then. Jake replied, leaning down to kiss her, slow and deep, as if the universe had shrunk to just the two of them. When they parted, she looked at him, golden eyes gleaming, no longer cold but brimming with something new, trust. From now on you sleep in my quarters, she said, voice resolute. Jake raised an eyebrow, his crooked grin familiar. An order? A choice, she answered, turning away, but the smile lingered on her lips, a silent promise. That night, in Vera's private quarters, words were scarce. They weren't needed. They lay together, no armor, no blades, just two beings, or near enough, who'd found each other among the stars. Vera rested her head on Jake's chest, listening to his heartbeat, an alien yet comforting sound, like a wordless song. She didn't sleep right away, not from anxiety, but because she wanted to savor this moment, where she didn't have to be a commander, didn't have to be invincible. You know about that weapon, don't you? She asked, her voice a whisper in the dark, Clythar's moonlight spilling through the window, illuminating her face. Jake's breath hitched for a second, then eased, as if he'd anticipated the question. You're quick, he said, voice light but not evasive. Don't lie to me, Ramsey, Vera said, lifting her head, her sharp gaze locking onto him. The Vesper message. Sensor-shielded gear. You know it's not standard cargo. Jake sighed, his hand stroking her back, gentle but firm. I know, he admitted, voice low. I didn't tell you because I had to be sure you weren't involved. That weapon, it could wipe out Clythar, level everything for thousands of miles. I didn't want you caught in the crossfire, not until I knew who was behind it. Vera sat up, her eyes hardening, a spark of anger flaring. You kept secrets from me? Her voice was sharp, but beneath it lay hurt, as if he'd grazed an old wound. To protect you, Jake said, his eyes never leaving hers, his voice steady as a vow. And I'll keep doing it if I have to. She stared at him, anger mingling with a feeling she didn't want to admit, being shielded, alien yet not unwelcome. She lay back down, closer this time, her hand resting lightly on his chest. 48 hours, she said, voice low but resolute. We stop it. Together. Jake kissed her forehead, his breath warm against her skin. Together, he replied, and in that moment, they weren't just two people but an alliance, forged in fire and blood. 36 hours later, Jake and Vera led an elite squad into the western abandoned mines, where the superweapon was hidden. The underground tunnels were frigid, blue light from energy cores pulsing on the walls. Jake, now clad in enhanced Clytharian armor, moved beside Vera, energy rifle in hand. They worked in sync, no words needed, every glance and gesture a shared understanding. The remaining rebels guarded the weapon, but Vera's team outmatched them. Jake hacked the control system, disabling the reactor core in the final seconds, the countdown frozen at 10. Vera cut down the last rebel commander, her blade flashing in the dark. As the base trembled from the thwarted explosion, she grabbed Jake's hand, pulling him from the tunnels, her eyes blazing with pride. They returned to the base at dawn, the desert glowing red under the rising sun. Vera stood before her troops, reporting the mission's success, but her eyes never left Jake. He'd proven his worth not just to her, but to Clythar. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder before everyone. "He's one of us," she declared, voice resounding. "And I'm proud to stand with him." Jake smiled, his gaze locked on hers. "Proud to be here, Commander." As night fell, they stood on the deck, staring at the star-filled sky. Vera leaned into Jake, no armor, no fear. "We stopped it," she said, voice soft. "But there'll be other threats. And we'll face them." Jake replied, his hand tightening on her shoulder. Together. They didn't know what the future held, but among the stars, they'd found a new beginning, not just an alliance, but a promise, forged in trust and fire. Dear listener, as Clythar's blue-green moon fades and the tale of Jake Ramsey and Vera draws to a close, I hope this journey among the stars has left its mark on you. This isn't just a story of action or conflict, it's a testament to the power of trust in others, in yourself, and in the ability to overcome prejudice to find connection. Jake, an Earthborn freighter, and Vera, the proud Clytharian commander, began as opposites, divided by suspicion and difference. But through fire and blood, they learned that true strength lies not in weapons or armor, but in the courage to place faith in the person beside you, even if it means bearing your vulnerabilities. The lesson here is this: trust, fragile as it may be, can forge alliances stronger than any technology. Jake didn't triumph through brute force, but through compassion and resolve, quintessentially human, quintessentially HFY. Vera, despite her power, found freedom in shedding her invisible armor to embrace someone she once saw as an enemy. I ask you to reflect: have you ever trusted someone against all odds, and how did it change you? This story came to me in quiet hours, pondering the clash of civilizations and what makes humanity shine among the stars. Did Jake and Vera move you? Did their seamless coordination in the final battle thrill you? Does the ending, with its promise of new challenges, leave you hungry for more? Your feedback is the spark that guides me. Like Jake hacking a Clytharian system, I'm reaching across the void, seeking the signal of your emotions and thoughts. Share them, whether a shout of excitement, a whisper of awe, or a silent contemplation. You and I, listener and storyteller, build this universe together. And who knows? Like Jake and Vera, we might face new storms as one.